Really happy to be here. So this title had a few different, this talk had a few different titles. It was how to juggle your moral convictions with your career path, or how to future-proof your career without softening your pro-life views. And it's a really good time to be here, especially for the theme of unmuted, because I'm going to talk about censorship and freedom of speech, and why it's really important that we keep this, pro-life conversation in our everyday, so including in our workspaces. Okay, great. So you guys may have heard of the song lyric, "More money, more problems," but I like to say no convictions, no conflict. And despite the pretty packaging of so-called tolerance and inclusivity these days, having a diverse viewpoint, such as the pro-life viewpoint, in popular culture is just not encouraged anymore. And instead of friendly debates, it seems that our workplaces and friendship circles only allow conformity. Voice an unpopular belief, and you're at risk of being cancelled, mocked and ousted, both socially and professionally. And in an era of the "you do you" mantra, too many of us are scared to voice our deeply held convictions. We naturally don't want to be called names. I've been called anti-woman, for example, or hateful. You don't want to be used as an example. You don't want to be avoided or confronted by friends. And we certainly don't want to be fired or withheld work because our values don't align with those of our employers. I have experienced all of these personal costs, and it isn't easy. But I'm here to encourage you because you aren't alone. Firstly, it's all textbook. In fact, I asked ChatGPT, if you were Satan, how would you deter professionals from being part of the pro-life movement? Here's what it said. It said, if I were to approach this from a purely strategic angle, focusing on tactics Satan might employ to sway professionals away from the pro-life movement, I'd start by exploiting their individual vulnerabilities, biases, and internal contradictions. The goal would be to sow doubt, division, and confusion, undermining any firm commitment to pro-life ideals. And here's how it might unfold. Promoting relativism and moral ambiguity. Encourage a mindset where morality becomes subjective. So this is the "you do you." Instead of presenting clear moral stances, I'd emphasize that there's no one-size-fits-all in ethical dilemmas. By making the lines between right and wrong blurry, professionals, especially those in fields like law, medicine, and psychology, might struggle to draw firm conclusions about when life begins or what constitutes a moral decision regarding abortion. The idea would be to convince them that ethical decisions are always contextual and that trying to enforce a singular moral framework is outdated or oppressive. Okay, what else would Satan GBT say? It would weaponize science and technology. So it would highlight any advances in medicine or reproductive technology that make the issue more complex. For example, advancements in genetic testing, prenatal surgery, and reproductive technologies might be used to mud the waters on what defines life. I'd encourage professionals to focus more on technical, scientific definitions of life, such as viability and brain activity, rather than philosophical or spiritual arguments. By framing the debate in terms of progress and human rights, it becomes easier to dismiss pro-life arguments as backward, archaic, or uninformed. It's a long list. I would appeal to personal and professional gain. So I'd create environments where the pro-life stance is seen as professionally risky or socially stigmatized. Whether through peer pressure or institutional incentives, I'd push professionals to adopt positions that align with what's considered the mainstream or politically acceptable. In many fields, especially academia, healthcare, and law, those who adopt controversial or minority views may face repercussions, whether that's in terms of career advancement, funding, or public perception. I'd amplify these risks to make professionals question whether sticking to pro-life values is worth the potential personal and professional consequences. And I certainly felt this in my career. I would foster a sense of compassion for the hard cases. I'd focus on individual circumstances that make the pro-life stance seem harsh or incompassionate. Cases of rape, incest, serious fetal abnormalities. I'd make these scenarios emotionally charged, encouraging professionals to focus on the perceived suffering of the mother, child, or both, rather than the broader ethical implications of abortion. By emphasizing compassion, I could convince professionals that being pro-life is out of touch with the realities of human suffering and suffering women face in difficult circumstances. I would discredit the pro-life movement, so I'd encourage the idea that the pro-life movement is rooted in extremism, religious dogma, or misogyny. By associating pro-life activism with these negative qualities, professionals might be more inclined to reject it as a legitimate or reasonable stance. This tactic would undermine the credibility of pro-life advocates, painting them as a part of an insular, ideological minority rather than as proponents of a rational, ethical position. Okay, I've got a few more. I'd exploit cognitive dissonance, encourage professionals to become trapped in their own cognitive dissonance by making them feel torn between their professional expertise and their personal belief. For instance, doctors or nurses might feel conflicted between the Hippocratic Oath, which focuses on preserving life, and the belief that a woman should have the right to make decisions about her own body. I would amplify this internal conflict, suggesting that the best course of action is to adopt a stance of neutrality or to defer to patients' wishes without taking a strong ethical position. And this was certainly me. I was very much on the fence. I knew what I believed myself, but I never wanted to voice it. 2 more. I would appeal to autonomy and individualism. So I'd promote an overly individualistic mindset that prioritizes personal autonomy above all else. In a professional context, I would frame the issue as one of individual rights, encouraging a narrative where women's autonomy and decision-making powers are paramount, and the fetus is seen as subordinate to the mother's rights. Professionals who value autonomy and individual freedom might find this message particularly persuasive, even if it runs counter to their personal beliefs about the sanctity of life. And finally, I would create distractions and false equivalents. So I'd divert attention from the core moral issues surrounding abortion by focusing on other social issues like economic inequality, access to healthcare, or gender equality. By emphasizing these bigger systemic problems, professionals might be led to believe that the abortion issue is just a distraction or that it pales in comparison to other urgent societal needs. This could help create a sense that pro-life activism is part of a narrow conservative agenda rather than a universal human rights concern. And then it goes on to say, so by combining these strategies, relativism, professional pressures, compassion for exceptional cases, discrediting the opposition, and promoting individual rights, I'd aim to erode the moral clarity and conviction that professionals might feel toward the pro-life cause. Over time, the goal would be to render the pro-life movement not only unappealing, but also untenable in certain professional environments. And too often we have witnessed industries and companies pick a side on a social or moral issue. And then what they do is they attempt to censor or to mute one side of the debate. And we really, all of us in the room, need to be committed to embracing a diversity of views. So C.S. Lewis once observed that friendship is born at the moment when one person says to another, "What, you too? I thought that no one but myself." But we're now living in a society where to have an opinion or a lifestyle away from the status quo is being more and more discouraged. I know this because I used to be a journalist, unknowingly pushing the mainstream agenda out into the world. And what this does is it inevitably leads to self-censorship. So you're actually muting yourself because you don't want to say any of these things out loud in public. And then that leads to a narrowing of ideas, a lack of debates, and a lack of conversations that build those surprising new friendships, just like C.S. Lewis describes. If you're not having these conversations, you're not going to meet other people with your same convictions. And this is really impacting students. I know a lot of you are students here. So according to a nationwide poll released by ADF UK, almost 40% of students admit fears that expressing their views on campus could adversely affect their future career opportunities. And then a quarter of university students are not actually sharing their true opinions because they clash with those promoted by their university. And then you have a half of students feeling that their peers will treat them differently if they express their true views about certain issues important to them. This is a really sad reality, but I can attest to the fact that this does happen within education and at work. And I know this because it happened to me. So I used to be a thriving freelance writer and editor across magazine titles like Elle, Marie Claire, Cosmo, Glamour, and more. And just for context, when you leave a magazine, they make a cover with you in it. So I wasn't actually the cover star of these magazines, but it's just me on them to show the titles. And that was all a really wonderful career. I was flourishing in it until I posted a photo of myself and my sister at a pro-life party at the abortion resistance launch on my personal Instagram, which was private at the time. And this photo was, just us two, looking lovely, me and my sister. And my original caption was just very short, standing up against the biggest form of discrimination. I later went to try to reason with the unreasonable. Sometimes you can't do that. So this post, it in no way violated the mission of my employer. It didn't touch on my work, and it did not impact my ability to write for them. I got cancelled because of my Christian conscience, despite my liberal company's pledge to embrace diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. So around 6 months later, I received an email spelling it out from an editor. She explained that the publishing house I had been working for had to stop working with me because my beliefs went against what their brands stand for. And I really don't tell you this to scare you, but to encourage you to be more strategic than I was. As a recent convert at the time, I decided to take John's scripture about how the world will hate us very literally, that stepping out of belonging to the world meant I would probably be isolated, friendless, and apparently jobless. And the fact is, in actuality, what happened to me was a genuine violation of my basic human rights and my freedom. I just didn't realize that at the time, so I completely consented to this cancellation. I just accepted it. So I'm here today to ask the question, how can we hold our convictions, yet be strategic and professional while future-proofing our careers? How can we encourage different opinions and friendly debates in the workplace? And how can we resist self-censorship and consenting to being cancelled? Ultimately, how can we turn up the volume and be unmuted? And here is how. I'll give you the answers. Some of them anyway. Oh, these are the questions I just asked. Perfect. So the number one is to confidently learn your legal rights. I do not have a legal background, so this is something that I've definitely been having to learn in my adult years. And it's good to know that it truly is against the law to be discriminated against. And in the UK, types of discrimination, also known as protected characteristics, include your age, whether you're married, whether you're pregnant, on maternity leave, any disability, race, nationality, ethnicity, religion, or belief, and sex. And this freedom of conscience is a basic human right that should always be protected. So I'll just go through a few acts that you really should know about. So the UK's Equality Act 2010 holds a very privileged position in UK law, and it states that you must not be discriminated against because you are or are not of a particular religion or hold or do not hold a particular philosophical belief. And your rights to free speech are also consolidated in these two parts of the European Convention on Human Rights. So those two are freedom of thought, conscience, and religion, which is holding a belief, and that's Article 9 of the European Convention, and also freedom of expression, so that's expressing a belief that you have, and your pro-life philosophy is a belief. And now that workplaces trendily claim a commitment to diversity, and society also claims to stand up for minorities, we must lean into this strategically and show that our pro-life stance is inherently connected to our faith or our philosophical beliefs. Because truly everyone has the right to freedom of expression. And this right shall include freedom to hold opinions and to receive and impart information and ideas without interference by public authority and regardless of frontiers. So to recap this, the Lord's to know, because it's really good for you to be able to demonstrate that you confidently understand and can reference your rights. Honestly, if you bring any of this up to an HR department, they're going to be freaked out because it just knows that you actually know what you're talking about. So you've got the Equality Act 2010, remembering that the Equality Act protects people from discrimination in the workplace and beyond. And when it came into force on the 1st of October 2010, it consolidated that all existing anti-discrimination law into one Act of Parliament. So it's a really strong law. And then the Equality Act also safeguards those 9 protected characteristics. So do remember religion or belief. And that includes Christianity, gender critical, and pro-life beliefs. And this act prevents discrimination on the grounds of any protected characteristic, as well as protecting people who are associated with someone who has a protected characteristic. So I want to really emphasize that everyone has the right to freedom of expression. And this right shall include freedom to hold opinions. Oh, I've already said this. This has come up again. So that's just to recap. Please just remember Equality Act 2010. That's going to be your friend, and know that you are protected in that. Your belief, your pro-life belief, is a protected characteristic. And then number 2 is to set boundaries early. So you do have the right to conscientious objection under UK law in certain contexts. So as a magazine journalist, I was actually forced to go on a pro-choice women's march on my second day of a new job with a magazine. And I wasn't at the time aware that my beliefs were actually protected under law, and I could have said, I don't feel comfortable, I don't want to go. The problem is that you also worry about the social ostracization. You worry that people will suddenly start to brand you as other. So I went. And now I understand that actually, I was protected by law, and I could have very easily just stood up for myself in a very calm and joyful way, and they wouldn't have done anything else other than just let me miss the march. So under indirect discrimination claims, we can argue that there are policies that unfairly disadvantage people with our beliefs, and that we have a right, consequently, to conscientious objection. And provided the request is reasonable, you're likely to be protected. So an example of an absolute objective right to conscientious objection is under the Abortion Act 1967. And that's where healthcare workers are legally allowed to refuse participation in abortion procedures, even if the refusal is based on secular moral beliefs rather than religious grounds. And number 3 is to build your community, and you're definitely doing that by being here. We really can't do this alone. I truly believe that community is the antidote to so many problems in our society. If more people felt supported and lifted up by their communities, surely there would be less demand for abortions in the first place, and less cases of women being coerced into terminating their pregnancies. Also, there'll be less cases of people like me who felt completely alone and isolated when this cancellation happened at work. I lost my job, I lost my livelihood, I didn't have community, and I didn't know who to turn to. So I really want to encourage you guys to build strong friendships, build networks. These friendships will grow into professional networks. You'll start seeing these people at the same events, and you'll start understanding that there's so many more of you across every single type of industry. And that just really will strengthen you. And I do also really encourage everyone to go into whatever industry you want to go to, because we don't want to just have an echo chamber. We want to make sure that there are lots of us everywhere so that the message can really grow. And then we also need to be there for one another. So we need to be sanity checkers. So as a caring, listening ear, or as a soundboard for ideas or problem solving. And mostly so that we can not only pray for one another if you are of faith, but to take action to help each other. It's amazing now, sadly too late after the fact, how many people hear my story and get so excited about taking this to the employment tribunal and oh my gosh, you'd have such a good chance, because I didn't know anyone who could have done that before. So this is why I'm very passionate about giving this talk, just so you guys know you are protected and you're not alone. And I truly did consent to my cancellation without question. I did not even send an email back or anything, because I didn't feel I had anyone to turn to. All of a sudden, I was going from having 12 emails a day from my colleagues to none, and it was really strange. My colleagues turned their backs on me, and so did many of my friends. And these are some that I'd known since I was a child. So I did feel completely alone. I was jobless, friendless, and I'll be honest, I was kind of hopeless at that point as well. And I was really only able to get myself out of it when I realized that wasn't actually the case. I wasn't actually alone, and neither are any of you. So if I could actually turn back time, what would I do? I would have brought my case to the employment tribunal. I would have gotten what's called a subject access request. So that is something that anyone can ask any employer, and that would be able to have uncovered blatant emails and messages that would have likely circulated around my workplace, probably telling the team not to work with me again. And according to people I've been talking to, my sources, I likely would have won that case because it was a very clear discrimination, and also because I had the email that said they had to stop working with me because of my beliefs. Number 4 is going a little bit legal again, but to know what genuine discrimination is. So the 4 main forms of discrimination prohibited by the Equality Act are, firstly, direct discrimination. So this is when you are treated less favourably because of a protected characteristic. So remember the protected characteristics. In this case, you're really going to lean into religion and belief. And then indirect discrimination is where a policy, criteria, or practice, which is neutrally applied, puts one member of a protected characteristic at a substantial disadvantage to another. While harassment is words or conduct relating to a protected characteristic which has the purpose or effect of creating a hostile or intimidating or offensive environment. And then you have victimization. And this is when you are treated worse after actually raising a grievance. So you might have said, I actually felt directly discriminated against because of my belief here. And then you're worried that they're suddenly going to start treating you differently because of that. That is actually against the law. So when you're treated worse after raising a grievance, so for a protected act, for example, if you're starting proceedings, that's also called victimization. So this direct discrimination occurs when people in the workplace are treated less favorably due to their beliefs. So for example, being dismissed for expressing an opinion, or like me, having work which had no connection to my beliefs withheld because the company didn't agree with my pro-life view. And then on top of this, I mentioned there's the more insidious social ostracization that deeply impacts our experience of work culture and results in those who do not conform to prevailing cultural views hesitating to share their beliefs at all. And the problem with this is that I hid my beliefs for so long that even I stopped believing them, because the problem is when you don't live in line with your values, you start forgetting your values altogether and you just completely go with the world. And what this resulted in was my own self-censorship, me muting myself, and in general, a really inauthentic work culture that just seeps into a one-dimensional society with a favored narrative and a belief system. And I didn't realize as a magazine journalist, I was actually telling the same stories. I thought I was, I went into journalism to be curious and to just share people's stories and be able to really show what the world was about. But you don't realize when you're in an industry which has a very specific political view that often it will just continue to echo that view through different stories. So truly, I do say that workplaces need to do better, but also we as professionals need to do better. We need to be better at standing up for what we believe in. And there are many examples of employers who are actually really good if they realize, for example, if you're Christian, they will make adjustments to ensure that your faith is respected. And I think if we continue to mute ourselves in the workplace, they'll never know, employers will never know what they need to actually step up to do. And in fact, employers should be aware that if candidates or otherwise qualified candidates are not selected because of their Christian convictions or their pro-life beliefs, it could actually lead to a successful claim of discrimination at the employment tribunal. So lots of ways that you are protected. And then my fifth tip is to be ready to challenge your company if needed. But I will say the caveat, please do this politely, charitably, and joyfully, because the only way we're going to shift the culture is if we can do it in a way that people can receive. And if we are, friendly, confident, competent, people are a lot more able to listen to what we're trying to say. And challenging the status quo requires not only courage, but skill. So you do need to be strategic about this. And I know that last year's theme was courage, so I do still encourage that theme of courage. And in the same way that our ethnic identity just can't be switched off at work, so I can't just walk into an office and pretend I'm not half Chinese, we should not be expected to leave our beliefs at home, especially when they in no way undermine our ability to do our job well. And if you know that you've been discriminated against, do open this conversation with your HR team after researching your rights. As I say, even just knowing some of these terms that I've given you today will be able to give you so much more confidence, and HR teams probably won't even know these as well as you might do at that point. And it just shows that you know what you're talking about and you won't necessarily take discrimination lying down. You are actually going to stand up for your rights. And I mentioned a subject access request. So that is if for some reason HR aren't being receptive to you and you really do know that people have been talking about you, you are able to file this subject access request. It can be around email, Slack. I don't know if any of you guys use Slack or Teams yet. I see someone a fan of Slack. And so you can ask for those messages to be discovered and uncovered, and you could ask for your name, you could ask for pro-life, you can put specific words into that. And that allows you to get access to any communication about you that may include keywords to the subject you're being discriminated against. It's also worth noting because at the time of my cancellation, I was freelancing. And although my entire livelihood was to one publishing house, I assumed I had no rights as a freelancer. And I do want to say that actually this does not exclude you if you are a freelancer. If you look at the Equality Act 2010, Section 41, you'll see a whole section on contract workers. And this does say a principal must not discriminate against a contract worker, and to the terms to which the principal allows the worker to do the work. So as long as you're able to do the work, you should not be discriminated against. You may remember at the beginning of the talk, I said that Instagram post in no way impacted my employer, and my Instagram at the time was personal and private, so it wasn't even something that everyone could access. Now it's public because I'm happy for everyone to see this. And then as well, as long as you're able to continue doing the work and the principal affords the worker access, or by not affording the worker access to opportunities for receiving a benefit, facility, or service, or subjecting the worker to any other detriment. So even my freelancers out there, my self-employed people, you are covered. But I will say, be prudent. You really do have to remember that anything you ever share online can be unearthed, even years later, but you can be confident that the law is likely on your side. And I doubt that you guys are saying anything that could be known to incite violence or anything on your online channels. At least I hope not, so please do be prudent about that. And I love this scripture from Matthew 10:16. So, in it we hear, "Behold, I send you forth as sheep in the midst of wolves. Be ye therefore wise as serpents and harmless as doves." So I want to give you a few examples of how to be strategic. So I'm hoping and guessing that some of you guys are students here. So for example, if you're starting a new pro-life society at university or you're helping with an existing one, It's important to make sure that your society does exactly what it says on the tin. So the Equality Act, as I keep repeating, under Section 10, protects religious and philosophical belief. So as such, it is really important that you make it clear exactly what those beliefs are, so it's clear to all that they are legally protected. Or for example, for students who might be throwing a pro-life society event, it's encouraged that you make it really clear that the intent of the event or the topic is to further educate or to learn through the peaceful expression of views. Basically, it's a lot harder for someone to claim that they've been harassed or discriminated against or otherwise subjected to degrading environment when they have been well informed of the nature of the event and have voluntarily attended. So as long as you say everything very much up front, you're not going to be able to have someone come along and say, oh my gosh, you've harassed me by showing me this beautiful image of a fetus or something. You're not going to get that. And generally, the more it's clear that the intent of your event or topic is to, really further educate with those peaceful expressions, the better. So in conclusion, at this time when I, lost my livelihood, I really lacked the knowledge of my legal protections. I lacked the boldness to question the system, and I lacked a support system that could have encouraged me to seek justice. So I really want to encourage you all to make sure to always ask yourself, and also your friends, your family, your future employees, and your colleagues, this question that's up on the slide now. If we aren't allowed to share our opinions or our own personal platforms without fear of tangible consequences, do we really live in a democratic society that upholds our basic human rights? And I still struggle to be brave. I still shy away from confidently sharing what I know to be objectively true, and I certainly try to avoid conflict at all costs. I definitely am a people pleaser and non-confrontational. But when I find myself in this place of passivity, I really try to remind myself that it isn't on me to defend my reputation or my views, as I can't control what others think of me. But it is my duty to not let fear breed the impression that my views are in the minority. And you guys are here alongside 240 other young people, so your views are definitely not in the minority. And I want to encourage you guys to just take note of these resources, which are various ones. Some are secular, some are Christian. So you've got the Equality and Human Rights Commission, and this is the national equality body that provides information and guidance on the Equality Act, which we've talked about today. You've got ADF UK, so that is the Christian legal advocacy organisation where I work, and we you may recognise Isabel Vaughan Spruce. She's probably one of our most known clients. And we are really trying to build an alliance to be able to further human rights around the world and advocate for the right of people to freely live out their faith, their convictions, and to defend religious freedom, sanctity of life, parental rights, marriage, and family. And then you've got the Free Speech Union, so they are a non-partisan mass membership public interest body that stands up for the speech rights of its members. And then students, you've got the Office for Students and also the Office of the Independent Adjudicator. So these are all really good resources for you to be aware of. As I say, I really do think at the time is now for us to be very strategic. It's one thing to be passionate and to be bold about our beliefs, but we do really need to think about it prudently and to move forward strategically. So that's a little bit of my story, and with a little bit of peppering in of the legal language that you guys hopefully will never need to use, but hopefully will just build confidence in you so you can move forward in your professional careers knowing that you have rights, the law is behind you, and as I say, this language will scare most HR departments, so really don't worry about that. And just know that your belief, your pro-life belief, it's worth standing for, and it's not going to be the end of your career in any way. If anything, I think the conversation is really broadening now around free speech, and I think people are really starting to accept that. And the more that we're able to share our opinions in a peaceful and fruitful way, the better it's going to be for every single one of our industries, for our lives, for us as professionals, for us as parents, and for us as students. So I hope that's been helpful, and I'm here for questions. I also have one of my colleagues here from the legal team, so he'll be able to even dig more into any legal questions if you want to find us later on as well.